Marvin, maybe you can just take a second to just give a little bit of your background and bio for the audience, please.
Sure. My name is Marvin Johnson. I am been with Johnson & Johnson for about 4.5 years now, and I lead our service excellence organization, which is inclusive of the processes that we own, for which case management is one of those, our service quality, our process intelligence, as well as our service improvement initiatives. I am part of the overall global services organization. Prior to Johnson & Johnson, I co-founded a consultancy, Maryville Technologies. And then prior to that, I worked for a technology supplier named Digital Equipment Corporation, for those who've been around for a while, which got acquired by Compaq, got acquired by Hewlett Packard. So thrilled to be with you today, and excited to have the opportunity to share some of our experiences to the broader audience.
Thank you, Marvin. And I do want to reiterate that we're very pleased to have you here today. This is going to be a great conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Mainville. I'm one of the co-founders of Navvia. And just a little bit about Navvia. Navvia has been in business since, we've been since 1999. And we started our company as a consulting company focused on process management, process improvement, process optimization. And while doing that work, we created a product for internal use. It was a product to help our consultants design, document processes, and capture requirements for automation. That went on to become a commercial product. And today we're really 100% focused on the Navvia Process Designer. If you'd like to learn more about the Navvia Process Designer, you can go to g2.com, where you can see some customer reviews, or of course, you can always check us out at navvia.com. Marvin, why don't you just give a little back? I think most people know Johnson & Johnson, but if you could just provide a little background on the organization.
Sure. Johnson & Johnson is a global organization. We have roughly around 140,000 employees globally. We have three sectors: our medical devices, pharmaceutical, and consumer. Many of you may know we are looking to spin off our consumer business, so those activities are underway. We're really focused on improving the health for humanity, and a lot of the things that we're doing are in trying to enable the care of our patients, doctors, nurses that are on the front lines of the health of the world. So again, I'm located in New Brunswick. Our headquarters is in New Brunswick, New Jersey. However, we have offices throughout the world as well. So,
thank you for that. So before we get into today's conversation, I just want to run a little poll to get sort of a lay of the land and get an understanding of the audience that we have here today. So today's topic obviously is on case management and what Johnson & Johnson is doing in that space. So the question I'd like to pose to the audience is your organization currently implementing case management processes and tools? So there's a number of potential responses. Some of you might not be sure exactly what case management is, and hopefully you'll learn something about case management today. But the other responses you can see, we're considering a case management implementation, we have something underway, or we have a well-established case management process and tool. So if you could launch that poll, please. Thank you, Catherine. So we'll just give it, 60 seconds or so for everyone to give a chance to respond. So we got about 40% of the people responding. We'll let it go a little bit longer. We're at about 64% of the people. Just let it go a little bit longer. All right, it looks like we got about 70% of the respondents coming in. So can you see are you able to display the responses on the screen, Catherine?
Yeah, I think they are displayed. Can you see them?
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if others could. So thanks. Okay. So we got about 27% of the audience is not really sure what case management is. So we'll spend a moment talking about that next. 20% of you are considering a case management implementation. which is great because I don't think there's a better person that you could speak to than Marvin. So hopefully you'll be able to ask some of your questions and get some of your questions answered. 13% of you have something underway, and about 40% of the respondents said they have well-established case management processes and tools. So that is great. Okay, and let's move on to the next slide. So, given the nature of our business, we've been very much involved in IT service management for many years. And case management might be a term that's new to those that are focused primarily on incident management, problem management, change management, the standard ITSM practices. So Marvin, could you just share some of your thoughts on the key differences between case management and some of those base ITIL processes?
Sure. So when you think about case management in the J&J context, first I just clarify that if you have a background that's in the legal space, these are not legal cases. So case management for J&J is really the core process that enables us to fulfill services that are what I'll call business side services. So within global services with Johnson & Johnson, we are kind of the central and shared service organization that supports HR, procurement, and finance. Many organizations have a global services function that's on the business side, and they may only have finance or they may only have HR, but we kind of cover that full spectrum, and we're expanding into other areas. So as part of our global contact center and services that we deliver, case management is that process by which we capture the inbound requests that are business-centric requests, whether they in the HR space, whether they be regarding org changes, benefits, payroll, expense reporting in our finance space, our learning space as far as courses and things of that nature. So it is the process that governs and facilitates those inquiries, and in some cases it also facilitates some of the service requests, which are what we'll describe as a guided experience for someone that is making a request of the organization. But it's very focused on our true and our employees and our business partners that are maybe purchasing things from us. So we use it in that case. Unlike incident management, which is as many of you know, the kind of the core of incident management is to say something was working yesterday and we need to restore that service as soon as possible. For case management, we are looking to provide answers and guidance with what that may be through a subject matter expert or by way of policy regarding different services that we're offering as a central organization. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Would it be fair to say as well that, if you take a look at incidents, they're pretty structured and routine, whereas a case can really go many different ways. For example, if I was new to the company and, I needed to validate, for example, if a certain benefit package was available, or if someone in my family got sick, if they would be covered under the package, those require a different type of expertise, let's say, than a routine incident or a routine service request. It's very systematic.
Absolutely. So, other examples include, so in the HR space, some examples may be that you're inquiring about benefits, as you say. Another example may be that as we are recruiting talent, and we need to engage someone regarding, what's a fair compensation. What are the questions around their benefits around long-term disability and things of that nature. We also, folks that are retirees of J&J may be able to take advantage of that, may have inquiries around some of their retiree benefits. So those are HR examples. In the procurement space, there may be scenarios where someone has a question around something that they're trying to purchase. A supplier may have a question around what's going on with my invoice and the status that they may be experiencing. So those elements are things that are in that space. And I think I gave a couple of examples earlier regarding I submitted an expense and I'm not quite sure what's going on with that expense report, or I have a policy question around what can be expense and what can't. So if you look at case management as kind of the front end entry point, there are back end technologies, and I kind of see those questions coming through of, there's Salesforce, there's ServiceNow, there's the BMC Remedy. There are several technologies that are out there that can be leveraged and that has a case management component that is also integrated with some of those back end processes like change, incident, release management as well.
Mhm. Would it be fair to say that cases are far less scripted, let's say, than some of this, like a service request or an incident, where they require a little more subject, a little more nuance and a little more subject matter expertise?
I would say in the resolution of them, they are definitely more scripted and may require some additional subject expertise. However, there are some things that we are looking at, and it's kind of a service request can kind of guide you through the decision tree of whether or not you're even authorized to ask the question. So some of those attributes are common, but and there are some things that we look at certain things in our case management process, like first call resolution, right? So we want our contact center agents to be able to answer that the first time, that answer those questions during that first conversation. We have similar things like doing a shift left to shift things more to self-service. But to your point, they're more policy guided type of questions and not necessarily technology driven, with the exception of when we start looking at situations where someone may be having a challenge with not a technical challenge with something like Workday, but it's more of I'm seeing something from and I need to engage the business side of how on a how to navigate within a Workday or within an Ariba or within a Concur on expense reporting, and we'll have some business side expertise to engage and respond to those. Since there's nothing broken from a technology perspective, it's really more of a use perspective. We'll have subject matter experts there to handle that.
That's great. Could you spend a moment providing some background on your initiative, the scope of the project? I mean, some of the interesting things would be how many cases does your organization deal with over the course of a year? But the scope of the project, some of the desired outcomes, sponsorship for the project, where that sponsorship comes from, maybe the timeline. How long have you been involved? When you expect this project to wrap up?
Sure. So it's probably good to kind of back up a little bit and just talk about global services. So global services within Johnson & Johnson, our mission is to essentially power the people who are changing the trajectory of healthcare for humanity. And that's our promise. And then with the way we're trying to do that from a mission statement is being a trusted partner and creating game-changing solutions for J&J. So we have scientists and folks that are creating the products. And what we want to do in global services is bring game-changing technology and processes to the table that allow them to be able to focus more on the creating the products and less on the back office administration activities. So as part of that, we took on an effort started last year, and some of it was initiated by a need to kind of to make a technology move from one element of cloud to another element of cloud for our Genesis platform. So last year we kicked off a global program to do that. We run about 1.8 million cases a year across procurement, HR, and finance. What we wanted to do is to uplift that technology. So from an organizational perspective and our journey to reimagine our contact center, we took on the job of reimagining our telephony inbound IVR menus, which had evolved over time, that we wanted to take a fresh start and another look at that. We wanted to reimagine some of the things we're doing with case management, queue management, and request management, because we realized that as you grow organically, you don't necessarily have really good solid controls. So the journey, we're about 12 months into the journey, the global deployment. It took us about So the program is structured that has, we have both the technology, the org change, we have our data scientists, and then we have our process engineering and process intelligence team that are present. From my executive sponsorship, since this is core to our global services capabilities, we have some of the highest level eyes on this and being reported on it weekly. So we are well on our way. We've gotten pretty much 75% there. We're on the process design side. It took us about 3 months to reimagine these processes. But I'd say we took a bit of a unique approach. We are really embracing Agile, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we're doing from a process reimagination and design, that we're having the data lead that conversation. So we brought forward process intelligence tools that kind of help us attack that. But I will tell you, one of our challenges as well is that what we found on this journey is that, and we kind of knew it, but just didn't understand the magnitude of it, is that our processes were in different forms. And what some people called a process wasn't a process. It was more of a desktop procedure. And we had it sometimes, some of it was in PowerPoint, some of it was in Word, some of it was on a SharePoint site somewhere. So we wanted to make sure that one of our pain points was that we needed to get our global processes for our IVR menu structures, our case management, our queue and request, all into one place and under a common governance, so that we can use that to accelerate our intelligent automation and to right size our technology automations for it to be fit for purpose for the process. So that kind of what kicked us off, and we got about another 3 to 4 months to finalize the releases.
And that's 3 or 4 months to finalize the processes, or to actually have the processes implemented?
The processes are I would say we're on a roadmap, and I want to just pause for a minute to give hats off to my global process owner, who I believe is also on the call and listening, as well as some of our service improvement teams that are also on the call listening as well. We established last year in about 3 months, so from October to January, we reimagined our case management and our IVR processes, as well as, and then a month after that, we established our queue management processes. And then we're now in the middle of reimagining and presenting our service request processes. Since January, we have launched HR, payroll, and some of our finance components globally on those new processes and the technology. And what our GPO and my service improvement teams are doing is we're using that blueprint of the defined process to drive the automation. So my GPO, they were just had a call this morning talking about things that we're doing to continually automate and enhance the process, but it's being done in the context of that end-to-end process. So this journey won't end. As part of the definition of the process, we identify automation opportunities, and with our agile product teams, they've got those automations overlaid into their sprint and themes as part of the execution cycle. So it will continue to keep going. Processes were done within 3 months in January. We've got a couple more that we're refining, and then we are continually evaluating those as we go forward and driving out more automation and improvements as we learn.
So that's very interesting, and it sort of goes into the next slide here, is the importance of, so you brought up the fact that process was really the blueprint which you're following for the automation. And I noticed from a lot of just my general research into digital transformation initiatives, which obviously this is a major digital transformation. What I've seen is a substantial number of these initiatives will fail for various reasons. And I always felt that one of the core reasons was a lack of a process blueprint to drive the automation. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So imagine you've got our case management capability, as well as our IVR capability, is supporting 140,000 employees plus our business partners, and we're doing it across multiple languages, and we're dealing with multiple country laws, and we've been kind of doing this rollout over time. when we started this reimagination effort, and I think it speaks to the team that we brought to the table, as well as our unique approach, right? So we didn't get process people in a room and said the process people are going to figure this out, and then we're going to go off and hand it off to the technology people. And we didn't say that the technology people are going to come with the brains of the technology, and we're going to build our processes based on what the technology says. Nor did we say we're going to do this in absence of data. So what we did was we pulled forward some process mining capabilities and pointed it at our case management solutions, as well as our IVR solutions, because ultimately what we want to be able to do is to be able to see the experience from end to end. We want to be able to see when someone calls or connects through one of the channels. We want to be able to see that interaction all the way through, from the chat channel through the case to the resolution, from the phone through the menus to the case, to be able to see that end-to-end experience and be able to optimize that. But in a global organization and 1.8 million cases that are coming in across multiple services, one of the challenges is that, do I optimize everything, or do I find out where are the pain points? So we brought forward our process mining tools to be able to mine that data to give us a better understanding of the as-is processes. And then those pain points allowed us to justify and actually build the business case for what we're going to improve and what the major levers were. So the challenge in I'll call it the old school way, where we get everybody into a room and we get our sticky notes and put them up on the board. The challenge is people only remember what they can remember. It's not intentional, but there may be certain events that only happen at certain business cycles. So by bringing in process discovery up front, our Six Sigma Black Belts, which is also one of our GPO, was able to do the analysis up front, not at samples, but at scale. We could see all the transactions up front. And then that did two things. It confirmed our as-is processes and tech landscape. It also identified where some of the major pain points that were killing us from a service level agreement, from where we didn't have operating level agreements between and underpinning agreements between supporting groups, and where that was really just significantly impacting our ability to provide exceptional service. So we took all of that and then drove that into the process design. And then that also had our technology teams at the table up front, and our data scientist teams up front to kind of help us inform the to-be state as well.
Were there any you mentioned that when you did some of the initial discovery, you found that a lot of people's processes were ad hoc. Some of them were procedures, they're on different technologies. But did you have any surprises that came out of the process mining activities in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the processes?
Sure, I'd say that we had a couple of things. It's enlightening to kind of see the data. One, we found that some of our teams didn't understand the process from a data perspective. So number one, that was insightful. And once they did, it allowed everyone to really lean in and provide options for how we can improve. Number two, I would say from a process governance perspective, what we realized is that what was on paper and what was on SharePoint sites didn't match what was actually happening on the ground. And what we did, and we leveraged Navvia as kind of our going forward to kind of keep these things current. And we've got that integrated with a lot of our sprint cycles and things of that nature. Make sure we have a mapping between the actual process and the automation capabilities. I think the third thing that's probably was really enlightening was that the case management process meant different things to different people.
Yes.
So we had some people that were using case management for projects, some people that were using it for what we designed it for, and then others that were our technology team were getting enhancement requests for things that were really outside of the scope of what case management was designed for. So what that allowed us to do is to now say, now that we can understand that, we can quantify that, we can come up with better designs and better capabilities to address those things versus continuing to customize a commercially available case management solution to do something that it was never designed to do, which helps us both from a process governance as well as from a technology governance as well.
So move people over to the platforms that would be better suited for that activity rather than try to continually to modify the case management platform.
That's correct. And then define the processes appropriately for what they're trying to achieve, right? So if you're trying to shoehorn a project management process into case management, then you're always going to be in this situation. Is why don't I have these features? And I'm trying to do these elements end to end, and I'm always falling short. The other thing I would say, David, as well, is that what we also found is that these processes are integrated, but we could never see the integration points because of some of the things that were some swivel chairs that are happening between case and incident management, as an example. So we have scenarios where a case will ultimately result in us needing to create an incident, but making sure that we know what those interfaces are, and making sure that we've got the right underpinning agreements in place, right? So, and using kind of an older ITIL or IT example, right? If the slowest point of my connection is the network, it doesn't matter what you do on the front end or the back end, everything is going to slow down to that bandwidth, right? So what we started to see was that there are some teams, both from a human perspective, that were never staffed to be able to handle the volume that was coming at them. So as we designed the processes and we moved as part of our org change component, where we said, I want to make sure I'm staffed with the right people mapping to the right roles, that was revealed. And then the other things particular to process, and we've got folks that were driving a lot of intelligent automation and using robotic process automation. Some of the things that we were able to see up front was that there were some bots that were creating work for humans that were not really supposed to be. I mean, the intent of deploying the technology and the robotic process automation, that they would create the cases and route them to the right place the first time. But we got into this, what we revealed was who's managing the bots. They are able to be very efficient, but there becomes a process and a governance mechanism around how we manage our automation. So this journey helped us get insights to that and put things in place to govern that as well.
So it sounds like the real key learnings from this is that you took a real good data-driven approach, and you really understood the as-is environment before moving and reimagining your processes into the new technology. Now, sorry.
I was just saying, as we did the same technology we used to understand the as is and define what the improvements were, we used those to actually monitor and see the improvements as we were doing the deployments. So we're able to say we did this launch, and did we or did we not affect the metric that we thought we were going to affect? And we've been able to show significant improvements.
Those same tools will be part of your continual improvement and governance program.
Correct. We didn't change the math.
Now, did you already have a technology chosen before you did all of this as is work and process development, or did you use what came out of that to help identify a particular tool?
I'd say we had so for case management, we had a technology platform that we were fairly committed to. And then from our telephony platform, we were moving down a path. And as part of this, we did an evaluation of the technology landscape to determine whether or not we were still on a viable platform. So this data didn't feed a technology change. It did confirm that that the technology was capable. So we really kind of knew where we were going. And then as we got the processes defined, we identified areas for automation, and then we evaluated whether or not there were other automation that can be brought in that would complement the core technology base versus kind of going a best of breed. So we didn't from the beginning have a lot of individual best of breed. We already had global platforms in place. We had the conversation to make sure that strategically with our enterprise architects, that these were platforms that were going to be viable in the future. So then we just we brought this in to say we know that we have the art of the possible to automate, And now let's bring that forward and bring the teams together to be able to leverage that.
So earlier in the discussion, you brought up the fact that a lot of people didn't know, or didn't have a clear or consistent understanding of what a process is or what their process was. By that same token, when you look at a process, I assume you see it to be much more than just like a process flow chart, right? So
Sure.
can you talk a little bit to when you speak process, what do you think a process is? Like what's the the scope of a process?
Sure. So we have a diagram that basically says that the process has the mission statement and scope that defines the boundaries of that process. It has metrics, it has swim lanes, it has roles and responsibilities. It has what I would call controls and as well as life cycles associated with those processes. So obviously in the core of that is the actual, what we call our swim lanes and our process diagrams that you would see similar into a Visio, but wrapped around it, it's got the various inputs and outputs at each one of the steps. It's got the controls, it's got the metrics, and it's got the core, what I call the core data attributes that are required for this process to function end to end, right? So all of those are components of the actual process.
I'm interested you brought up the data components because, I've seen a lot of process documents in my day and very few of them get down to the level of detail of data attributes. For example, if you're creating a case, what are the 5 mandatory things you have to provide as part of that case? Or, what are the different fields or who gets notified? So do you see a good synergy between technical requirements and the process?
I do. Now, obviously I think there is a point in which we've kind of left where there are features and that are available within the technology landscape that complement the process and may or may not be required in order for me to have an end-to-end process design. So it's a bit of a balance between delineating between technology features that accelerate the process versus data that's required in order to execute the process end to end, because I may choose not to leverage some of these features, right? But some of these features may accelerate and say, I've got something that is 5 process sub-steps, and it's able to, by way of the technology platform, it's able to drive more those into one seamless step, right? And as part of that technology platform may have additional data attributes that they go well beyond. They need it for auditing and things of that nature, right? But we have a data science team who has basically done a data lineage of each one of the process and the technology to make sure that we have alignment there. So it's very insightful to understand for this process, where is it getting its master data from, right? So this process itself is generating data, but then it also is dependent upon things like location, people, org reporting structure, and the relationships of those to be able to determine whether or not we, so that it's not the owner of that data, of that piece of data, it is a consumer, and being able to distinguish between, from a process perspective, where I am a consumer of data versus where I'm a producer of data, which is really the transactions that are coming from the process.
What kind of governance are you putting around the processes themselves? Do you have process ownership in place? Is there a schedule to review the processes?
Sure. So we've done 2 things. One, we've placed our processes. They're in Navvia. We have a global process owner that is responsible for the management, both from a change as well as an education of the process, as well as a continuous improvement of the process. So the global process owner is driving in partnership with our technology product owners and our data science teams and our service improvement teams, is driving an efficiency agenda with our particular process, and he owns that and wakes up every day looking at the key KPIs, meets with the process customers or consumers or users on a bi-weekly, or I think actually a monthly basis, to kind of talk about what are we doing to improve, where are there bottlenecks, and how are we governing this. And then he's actually going to be deploying next quarter a whole process around how do we assess our maturity, and by bringing in information from the customers that are using the process and the technology.
That's great. Let's just move on from process and technology and talk a little bit about organizational change management.
Mhm.
I imagine on a program of this scale, there's been, there's a lot that needs to be done to make sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction. Can you talk a little bit about your organizational change management strategy in respect to this program?
Sure. So if you kind of look at our organization, we have what we'll call service delivery. These are the people that are using the process, and they are the people that are actually answering and fulfilling the services that are enabled by our case management process. We also have our product owner and product management teams, and then we have our process owners. Our process owner who's assigned to this particular process. When we finished the work of defining the process, we then moved into an organizational alignment. The process had specific roles, and we spent time to make sure that we could map the organizational roles to the process. We introduced some new roles and clarified that. And once we had that, we basically put together training, communications, and kind of your job today versus your job tomorrow type mappings to ensure that as people are onboarded to the new technology and onboarded to the new processes, that was addressed. The other thing that is unique for us is that HR uses case management different than procurement uses case management. It's different than finance uses case management. So our central global process owner is not only looking at things from an end-to-end of that process, but he is interacting with process owners within each one of those functions. So there is a process owner that defines and owns how our benefits administration activities work, and where they use case management and where they don't. So our GPO is working with them. So as part of that communication is not only we're kind of taking an approach of there's a core set of capabilities from case, but then from an organizational adoption within HR, within benefits, there is how are they going to use and what's going to happen to them and how they use this process as we've done more standardization. So we have a change management team that is doing two things. One, the impact of process change. Two, the impact of technology and process. Three, the overall impact of our contact center, our different levels of support, and ensuring that they understand what the impact to them, and then all the change in comms associated with that. So our program is handling the contact center change in comms, and then our GPO is handling the GPO to GPO interaction, as well as the freshness of training, and making sure that we're doing two things. One, making sure that we're not duplicating information, which increases our management debt of how do we keep all this stuff current. But we're really kind of saying this is the core process, and then there is how it gets instantiated within HR and procurement and within finance.
The differences between each of the functional units, right?
That's correct. And what we want to make sure we do is we're using their language, right? So, and as part of org change is that the HR people don't want to hear procurement examples. The procurement people don't want to hear finance examples. So what we're trying to make sure that we do is we are packaging this to them in a way. It's the same, but we're using examples that they can gravitate to versus generic things that are not relevant to them.
Was there a substantial amount of communication prior to the program starting? I mean, we're to alleviate people. I'm sure any kind of change like this can, cause some certain fears within people. How's it going to affect my job? Like, do we really need this? Was there much done up front to really express to get everybody on board and to, build make it a burning platform that people want to get behind?
Absolutely. So I think the good news is, so one, there was upfront. Two, there was inclusion across the journey. Our as-is discoveries, we spent a lot of time saying that we need buy-in from all of the key stakeholders. Thus, they're included in the workshops. So some of our as-is discoveries, we had 60 to 70 people in those sessions. And they were leaning in, and we were kind of bringing that in. That same thing from a inclusiveness along the journey was we put in the appropriate communications and I'll call voice of the customer type sessions where we could hear not only from the people that are delivering the service, but also from the people that were our customers. And what was interesting is that we had this wasn't a pull. This was everyone was like, we've got to do this. The entire organization was behind it because we needed to improve our metrics. We have monthly business reviews and quarterly business reviews where we publish our metrics, and those metrics drove the need and highlighted the fact that we needed to do something to accelerate our value. So upfront, yes, all along the journey by way of inclusion and continued communication and success around each launch, and making sure we had all team members and parties participating, as well as sharing in the success afterwards. So we have, I believe, quarterly checkpoints with our executives where they come in and they communicate to the team that's delivering. This is what we're delivering. We're proud of you, and kind of reinforcing that all along the journey.
And does your organizational change program tie into governance? Like, how do you lock in those changes once you've established them?
So obviously organizational change management, I think it means different things to different people.
Sure.
Right? There are different dimensions of organizational change management, both from a comms, from an orchestration of people movement to the actual governance of the process, and making sure that that's tied in. So as we now have the processes under governance, our change in comms people, they're part of the approval process, so that we can do an assessment of every single change to the process may or may not require a shift or a change in role or a communication. So they are part of our change management and governance process. And if deemed appropriate, then we include them as part of the communication strategy, or they will come up with a recommendation that this is significant enough that we need to communicate broadly, or release it and let it go. So we're not trying to overburden that process with unnecessary communications. And then one of the feedbacks is, we get thousands of emails a day. So at some point it needs to stop, and send stuff to me that's relevant.
So, Marvin, we did get a number of questions along the way. It seems that just in the course of the dialogue, we actually answered 6 or 7 of them.
Sure.
So there's 7 questions. It looks, what I'll do is, why don't we just finish off the last talking point on the slides, and then we'll spend some time just going through the questions. So I just want to assure everybody, we have been monitoring the questions in the chat,
Sure.
and we'll get to these questions that are posted in just a few moments. So moving on to the sort of the final talking point of the conversation, key challenges and lessons learned. So going into this, I mean, obviously, you had your scope of your objectives, but what are some of the challenges you faced along the way? I mean, you mentioned one of them is like not everybody understood what a process was or had different viewpoints, but are there some others that you feel comfortable in sharing with us?
Sure. Some of the key challenges was getting access to the subject matter experts that actually knew what was actually happening on the ground. That was a challenge. Obviously balancing this initiative with other initiatives like our consumer activities and all of that was also key. And then third, I think there were some elements of what's the value of us selling the value of having data governance as part of this program, and allowing them to have the right level of staffing and the right seat at the table. And then the last one I would say is really establishing the value of having a process owner, right? Because I think over time there was some perspective that maybe the product owners can do it all. The product owner can be the They can be the process owner, they could be the technology owner, they can do it all, right? But I think the reality of what we found is part of that journey is and this learning is that there is value. Someone has to own the process, and that then feeds the product teams. So so lessons learned is that before we didn't have a process owner for these core processes. We thought that the product owners could do it. Now we have that as a result of this, and they are working exceptionally well together. So that's a key learning. And then I think I know I said the last, but I'll give you one more, is just that having that ability to have what I'll call the life cycle stakeholders at the table through all parts of the journey, right? Because by not having the product teams in the meetings when we're doing the design, not having, I'll call our service delivery teams, that representation of the people who have to live with this process that you're developing at the table, it causes you to have inefficiencies and a lot of waste in the execution. So by bringing those folks to the table, I think we were able to accelerate, and we had, our executive leadership has commented on a couple of occasions that every launch just seems like it's not a major event. It just happens. And I think it just happens because of the level of integration that we have across the teams.
Well, the hard work and, dedication also. Why don't we move on to the audience questions here? So one of the questions that came up is, what tool suite do you use to document case management?
We use Navvia today.
No, actually, the technology they do to capture the requests.
Oh, we have, so as far as our inbound, so what tool suite do you use to document case management requests and inquiries? The automation behind case management is Salesforce. So that's where the actual case gets logged, and it gets routed and created and governed. So that is Salesforce's case management. And then on the telephony side, we use Genesys Cloud.
Great. Also from Anthony, how do you handle privileged personal HR, legal types of inquiries in regards to securing the case records?
Sure. So we have a security model that is inside Salesforce that delineates each case has a record type that kind of drives it, as whether it's an HR record or a legal record or an employer labor relationships record. And there's a security model that basically is aligned to our Workday security model, so that you don't have access to information that you shouldn't have access, and those records are locked.
That's great. There's a question. I think we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, but can you comment on how you determine the delineation between the cases and things such as incident, task, problem management? Some cases may require, new development in a system, or might require an ITSM process to be kicked off. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So everything resonates from our service catalog. So these things that we're doing are not arbitrary. So we have services that we, as global services, are responsible for, and those services all have global process owners that are responsible for them and delivery teams that deliver them. So it's really kind of a preset scenario that says these things are going to be delivered by case management. And in those scenarios where the back end, that we have certain elements of the process that can only be done by the business, and certain elements that can be done only by IT. So if there's something from a security access, and it depends on the service that we're delivering, where the business owns those types of things, those types of transactions, they're either done by case, or that case will kick off an incident request. But some things that would be kind of the obvious. If our global contact center receives a phone call that says, I can't get access to Workday, we will log that case, and that case will then we will log an incident request with our IT team to get those things restored. However, on the other things where there are some nuances with some of our services where, like, let's say for payroll, I have an issue where folks out in the plants, they're trying to log their time and they can't get into Kronos to get their time logged. So that particular scenario is one in which our IT partners will will address that issue of time entry inside the system. We'll log a case, but we'll relate that case to an incident inside of in our ITSM suite.
Here's a simple question. Would you mind sharing the name of your process intelligence tool?
Sure. Our process mining. So I'll kind of clarify. Process intelligence for us is process mining and task mining and process modeling. So in our process mining and task mining space, we leverage Celonis to drive that as well.
Thank you. So here's an interesting question, is on the people side of things. So, you have all these processes living on paper and electronic format, but how do you transition that to people actually being accountable and executing the process consistently and also improving the process over time?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So I'll give you kind of the vision of where we're wanting to go and how that's practically playing out today. So our process mining tool is connected to our case management solution, which gives us at scale, real-time visibility into how our processes are functioning. Ultimately, what we want to be able to do is be able to connect the Navvia level of process documentation to the process mining, because our process mining tool will create us an end-to-end view of the process, and it will also allow us to do process conformance. So we have built rules around some of our case management processes that some of the rules they capture your typical SLA lead time, MPS type stuff, but then we're also looking at it also gives us the ability to find misroutes and problems that we're seeing with our queues and our work queues, and folks, not actually acting upon things in the way that they should. So that's also kind of leading to the redesign of some of our queue and our work structures. So in partnership with ultimately what we want to be able to do is these processes are not just things that are sitting on a SharePoint site or sitting in some SaaS repository, but they are living and breathing, and they're driving our process conformance. And that's part of that will then ultimately become part of our change management process. Our GPO will be able to see violations of process conformance. We'll be able to model the process with our process mining tool, and then that will drive updates to the solution, instead of having to do these periodic revisits of getting all the people in a room. We're going to be doing it at scale and near real time.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I mean, the fact that you have that data at your fingertips to be able to do that process improvement and course correction. This is another question around security. So how did J&J determine access for IT support where confidential data might be involved in the case records?
So obviously, as a healthcare provider, we have our privacy teams our data privacy teams are very much engaged in everything that's going on. So we have various business rules around what type of data can reside where, and as part of any new technology implementation, as well as part of a technology refresh and the ongoing governance, our data privacy team analyzes and looks at what data is in what systems, and will drive our segregation of duty requirements. So as part of our builds and ongoing journey, even in our process mining space, we look at that end-to-end process, and we look at the data and the systems that are holding those transactions, and our data privacy team is there weighing in on what should reside where and what needs to be controlled, who has the authorization to be able to see that type of data, and then that kind of drives the requirements from that perspective.
Excellent. Another question on organizational change management. So were the resources that helped with the OCM program part of your team, or were they actually a separate team from the program?
We have both. So we have a team that provides organizational change management as a service to cross-functionally as well as to the business. And then as part of our program, we bring those resources in. But then we also have someone that when we need more capacity, we go to that team. But then we also have someone that is dedicated from our contact center team that's dedicated to change management and that for that group.
Okay, we have two more questions. So the next one is, which role is responsible for prioritizing the user stories in the product backlog? Product owner or process owner?
Both.
So they work in tandem.
They work in tandem. Yep.
And
Obviously, the process owner is going to give the perspective from the value to the process. The product owner is going to give the perspective of, okay, I only have so much capacity, so you tell me which one you want. And there may be certain things that product owner will also kind of look at what's important to the platform. So we have an evaluation matrix that kind of drives elements as they come through that process.
excellent. And last question from Anthony. Anthony is asking, well, process owners have a limited span of authority. How do you keep process stakeholders with defined roles and responsibilities accountable for the execution of the process governance activities? Sure,
very good. In our world, the process owners are also directly connected and or collaborate heavily with the service owners. So these are the people that are responsible for delivering those services. And recently, what we now have done is that the process owners now report directly to the service delivery leads. So they're not an organization that's kind of abstract, and they're now part of the delivery execution arm of our organization. So they are as accountable for delivering those services as the people that are actually working the cases.
Excellent. So Marvin, we got to the end of the posted questions. There's often questions that come in after the fact, once
Sure.
we send out a copy of the presentation. Would you mind if I connect folks up with you through LinkedIn? Would you be open to that?
Sure, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and if I get any questions that come into us directly, we'll just route them to you and we'll let you make the connections with those folks. So I just want to really thank you this was a really, really interesting conversation. We're getting some feedback on that right now as well. I really appreciate what you shared with us. It sounds like a very, very challenging program. And it sounds like something that's probably a lot of fun to be part of as well. So I want to thank you for your time today. It was really, really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you as well. And just a quick shout out to some of my teammates that are on the call. Angel Rivera and Isel Mamadili are on the call. Isel's out of Prague and Angel is in the US. So and then also Aaron Vandergiesen, who is also a core part of the team. Can't do it. We could never been able to do this without them and all of the other stakeholders that are leaning in pretty heavily on this project as well.
Great, thank you for doing that. Just a couple of things before we wrap up. So for those of you who are not familiar with our company, Navvia has a tool called the Navvia Process Designer. The Navvia Process Designer has a number of capabilities that can help with process design and sharing, user stories and requirement gathering, process assessment and governance, and also includes a tremendous number of templates and provides a real value to those organizations that are looking to reimagine their processes and to implement processes in new pieces of technology. We also have a number of resources that you might find interesting on our website. If you're interested in going to navvia.com and going to our blog, you can see a number of interesting articles around process management and IT service management. For example, there's some of the articles listed here. The other thing we'll be doing is we'll be taking a copy of this presentation along with the recording, and we'll be sending it out to everyone who attended today, as well as those who have registered and were unable to attend. So we'll be very, very pleased to do that. So expect that in your inbox in a day or so. You'll see it there. We also are going to be sending out an email towards the end of as we get closer to the end of the year, with access to all of the webinars that we hosted throughout the year, so you can see them all on one landing page in one place and get the opportunity to go through and see some of the interesting guests that we had the pleasure and honor to work with this year. Let's see. Last thing, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about our product, we'd be happy to schedule a demo or a trial with you. If you're interested, you can go to navvia.com/contact, fill in the form, and somebody will reach out to you and get a demonstration or a product trial started for you. So I just want to thank everyone for being part of today's presentation. It was a tremendous subject, and It was a great guest that we had with Marvin. So thank you again, Marvin, for being part of the conversation. And I look forward to working with you in the future, and hope to be chatting with you soon. And for all those of you in the audience, have a great day and appreciate your time today. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.